Hello everyone, we're going to be going over chapter 15. This is the last chapter before the final. So it's about courtroom testimony. But before we get into courtroom testimony, I want to talk about report writing because report writing is what leads into courtroom testimony. So a few things about report writing. You want to be very factual, you want to be objective, you want to make sure that your grammar is correct, your spelling is correct, because let's go back to the spelling. A whole bunch of people are going to read this. It's not just between you and your sergeant or supervisor. It is between you and the prosecuting attorney, the defense attorney, the judge, perhaps it'll be reviewed by the press. So if you have a bunch of grammatical errors or spelling errors because it was done in a hurry, it's not going to look very good. So make sure that you take the time to do that properly. Next is just the basics of a report. You know, you add the who, what, where, when, why, how type of questions and get that in there. And it can be done in a chronological manner. But make sure that you don't have opinion or anything like that. You don't need opinion in a report. It really is just the facts. So that's critical. So you've done everything correctly with your report. Now it's time to be in the courtroom. Okay, so courtroom testimony is challenging at best, and even people who've done it a long time will get nervous beforehand. And a courtroom is a very formal setting, so you'll generally be, if you're an officer, you'll be in a Class A uniform. You'll look sharp, and then you've got your jury over on one side, you've got your judge on the other, and then you've got your defendant. And perhaps people will be out in the seats watching the proceedings. So it's very formal. All kinds of different things can happen. It can be, like I said, very nerve-wracking, but it's also very, very important. And so you'll stand up there, you'll raise your right hand and swear before the judge that you'll tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. And then you go and give your testimony. But you don't just start talking. You are asked questions and then you respond. So the prosecution generally starts and the prosecutor will lead you through questions. And it's important to just answer the questions. Don't go on and on and on, because the prosecutor has a plan and he or she will guide you through that plan. So just answer the questions. To give you an example, I asked a friend of mine who is a judge, a fellow that I've known for many, many years when I first got into this profession. I said, hey, can you give me some advice on courtroom testimony? He said, well, let me give you an example. If someone asks you, do you know what time it is? And many people will look at a watch or look at a phone. Back at that time, we didn't carry phones as much. Look at a watch and say, yeah, it's 3 o'clock. And he said, no, wrong answer. The question is, do you know what time it is? The answer should be, look at your watch and say, yes. And that's answering the question. So I found it to be a really good example of just answering the question. Okay, so we're back to our testimony. The prosecutor asks a question. The prosecutor will be standing over, perhaps over here. The jury will be over here. And so the prosecutor will ask a question. You turn to the jury and you answer the question. And you look everybody, you look around, making sure you're making eye contact and you're very calm and deliberate and upbeat, and answer the question. And then you go back to the prosecutor, then you answer the question to the jury. Same thing with the defense. So make sure that you are respectful and across the board, whether it's to the prosecutor or the defense, because sometimes a defense attorney might want to see if you're going to get angry about something. And if you do that, that is not good. So I've had, on a DUI case one time, I had a defense attorney start to yell at me and say all these things that I did that in his opinion I did wrong, and started to raise his voice and get real pointed. And what he wanted to do was to get me angry, but it didn't, because I know what I did. And so I turned to the jury and explained whatever he was asking me. I explained, and then once he saw that I wasn't going to get angry, then he calmed right down. It was no big deal. It is a lot of showmanship there, so just know that that might happen. Don't let them get you upset for any reason. It's not worth it. It's never worth it, and it just makes you look bad. That's the goal on the defensive side anyway. So sum that up real quick. Prosecutor is going to lead you through, maybe lead's not the right word. The prosecutor is going to ask questions that will conform with his or her plan. Defense attorney will bring up counter arguments, so you want to be able to, again, always look to the jury, answer the question, and you'll be just fine. But it's very formal. You don't sit until you're told to sit. You don't speak until you're told to speak, and then you go from there. If you don't know something, say that you don't know, or if you don't understand the question, say, could you please explain that again? Because they might ask 3 or 4 questions and it can be quite confusing sometimes. So if you don't know something, it's better to fess up to it right away than try to answer something incorrectly. A couple other thoughts on courtroom testimony. So beforehand, you want to review your report really, really well. Basically know what you did, when you did it. You'll generally have a copy of the report with you when you're testifying, but you can't keep looking to it. There's a few times you might be able to say, may I review my notes, or may I look at my report to get more clarity, and then look at your report and then look to the jury and speak. But you don't want to do that for everything. It doesn't look good. You'll also have wanted to meet with the prosecutor prior to testimony. The prosecutor won't tell you what they're going to ask you about, but the prosecutor may give you a bit of guidance. You also may have had a defense interview prior to that, in which case hopefully the prosecutor was present. That will help clarify things. So expect all those types of things, and then also know that the trial might not be for a year or 2 from the time of the incident. So you probably will have maybe 100 incidents in between then, and all this time's gone by, and you may or may not fully remember everything. That goes back to one of the important reasons for having a very good report written. And so be thorough about your report, because if you're sloppy with your report, the time comes you go back to give testimony, you can't look at your report because you didn't do a great job. Then that's really important. So do a good job with your report. Another thought on testimony: don't ever testify on somebody else's behalf. If one of the attorneys asks you, what did Officer so-and-so do during this call, just explain you can only speak on what you did, or what did they see. That's another thing that sometimes will come up. What did this officer see? I don't know. I can't speak on that officer's behalf. So I can only tell you what I did. And so same thing with your report. You never want to put in your report what other officers did. You can describe who was there. It's really important to focus on just what you did. And if you were directed by somebody, then that's another thing. Then say, Officer so-and-so or Sergeant so-and-so directed me to do this. But never say what they did, because you might be wrong. You might not have seen it correctly. And so let them write their own report and go from there. So that's just about it for courtroom testimony. My thoughts on it. Please read the chapter. Next up, we're going to talk about final review. So that's going to be another portion of this video. So it'll be a little bit of a bit more lengthy this week for videos. This should wrap it up. Again, if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'm happy to answer them. So next portion, we'll be talking about final review.